Yeah, no, virtual hugs. Nice to see you. This is great. Thanks so much for being here, everyone.
Hey, Bob.
Hi, Bob.
Hello.
I'm so much shorter than you right now. Let's
There you
come
go.
up here.
Okay.
Hey, Robert, how's it going?
Good.
Perfect.
Hey, everybody.
Oh, we got the Jasper fam.
Yeah.
Amanda will be joining me shortly.
Nice.
Oh, lovely background.
Mm.
You
Is
guys.
Gord playing with his backgrounds again? I know it's
No.
Robert.
Hey, Jackie.
Jackie, hi, Bob.
Hi, down here.
Hello.
Oh, there's a.
Jimmy.
Jimmy and Tatum.
Yeah.
Bill and
Hey, Jason.
Hey guys, how are you?
Good. Stevie and Piper there as well.
Where's Piper? She was here a second ago.
Hey, Phoebe. Hey, Amanda.
Hi.
Hey.
Hey Helen, how are you doing? Aunt Helen?
Good. I'm great. I'm just making sure that you're not having to look up my nose. The angle of the screen.
Yeah. Anyways,
There.
your
That's
hair
better.
situation looks pretty good. Yeah.
Right here looks good.
Awesome.
I
Right.
like the goatee, Jeff. That's quite a good look.
Wow.
Hey, thanks.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we dive right in while we let everyone trickle in? Thanks so much, Uncle Paul, for stepping up to be the first guest lecturer for Dubois University. Just trying to figure out a way that we can get creative and bring everyone together during this strange time. And I think it could be fun. You know, quarterly is a great opportunity for us to learn about each other as a family, which we don't do enough. And I think you know, we all have plenty of knowledge that needs to be shared, right? And learn from each other. So Uncle Paul has been kind enough as the first guest lecturer to actually write a little bio that I'd like to share as we introduce our professor here today. So Uncle Robert Paul Dubois. Paul was born in 1946, the second of 6 boys of his family. The family moved frequently until they settled in Richmond, British Columbia in 1957. After casting about for a vocation with increasing urgency, he joined the Air Force as a pilot. While in training, he married his childhood sweetheart, Elvira Shade, also known as Auntie Elvira, or your sister, or grandma for some of the people on the line. They raised 3 children while moving around the country every 3 or 4 years. After an undistinguished career of 29 years, he retired in Comox as a major. And he is fond of saying, "I once was an officer, now I am a person." He remained in Comox and pursued a variety of interests, including sailing, kayaking, backpacking, natural history, hiking, cycling, and skate skiing. He was also modestly accomplished, and as I mentioned, he wrote this himself, so modestly accomplished in endurance athletics, having competed in many running races, including a few marathons and 100-kilometer ultra triathlons and loopets. So for those who don't know, Uncle Paul has run a sub 3-hour marathon, which is definitely not just being modestly accomplished. It actually gives me confidence knowing that I share the same genes as Uncle Paul. Okay, back to the bio. We're almost done here. Among his seminal experiences are his first completion of the West Coast Trail with his BFF, the late Jim Glover, in 1974, the Annapurna Circuit and the Sanctuaries Trek in Nepal with his brother Gord in 2001, and his solo pilgrimage of the Camino de Santiago de Compostela in 2016, which he will describe today. Uncle Paul, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. We'll admit Cousin Aaron into the room so he can be here with us as well. And I'll hand it over to you.
Hello.
Thank you, Robert. Give it up for Uncle Paul.
Okay, just before I start into the presentation itself, I have my notes. I have to thank Daniel for organizing this. If he didn't do it, certainly nobody else would. It gave me a chance to sort of relive the Camino, the presentation. I went back through my journals and looked at all my pictures. and found out that I'd not only forgotten a lot of stuff, but I'd misremembered a bunch of other things. So that was interesting. I'm also have to thank my cousin Phil for at the last minute giving me a free copy of Office 365 so I could do this in PowerPoint. Otherwise, I would have been up all last night still working on it. So I'll just try to get the screen up here. No. I'm going to have to get Daniel to enable.
All right, we got tech support. I'm stepping in here.
Okay.
Let's see. You should be able to. I made you a co-host, so just in case you weren't able to share before, you should now. So there's a little green icon in the middle of Zoom that says share screen.
No, I'm on that, and it still has you. It still has me disabled.
Okay, now try. See if that makes any difference.
No.
All right, let me try one more time.
We did go through this with Jason.
Yep, try now.
Okay. Yep, I got it now.
Okay, awesome. Lucy and I were just attending an event that was on artificial intelligence, and it was this futurist conference, and they couldn't get the tech to work, which is kind of ironic, right? They're like, artificial intelligence is easy, but IT is not.
Okay. I just have to full screen this and slideshow it.
Yeah, really cool symbol.
Oh, I don't know.
Okay, how does that look? Have everybody got that up?
It's perfect.
That's good.
Okay. Before I start the actual show, which consists of about 185 slides, just joking, we'll do just a little quick history of the Camino itself. Common practice back in the day for Christians in general, and Roman Catholics in particular, to make pilgrimage to the Holy Land in order to enhance their spirituality and to gain certain favors. There's a thing called indulgence that you can have, and it would forgive some of your sins when you reach the afterlife. During the 7th century, the Muslims overran the Holy Land, and instead of going to Jerusalem, the pilgrims looked for other destinations, among which Camino de Santiago, which was reputed to be the resting place of the bones of St. James, although that's fairly controversial, became popular. It reached its prime probably around the Middle Ages, where about 250,000 pilgrims a year did the trek. A lot of them continued on after the pilgrimage to the Atlantic coast and picked up a scallop shell, which became the symbol of the Camino and still is today. There's a picture of one on the screen, as you see now. It has the cross of St. James on it, which is the top of it is a cross, which symbolizes peace. The bottom is a dagger, which symbolizes death. So it sends a bit of a mixed message. It's common practice for people to wear a shell on the pilgrimage and or hang one off their pack. So I'm wearing one now. The Camino kind of fell out of favor during the middle or after the Middle Ages, during the Reformation, the Enlightenment, and some of the European wars, and fall further into disuse until by sort of the 17th century, it was very lightly traveled. It continued to be so until sort of the late 1900s. There was a priest who lived along the route, the Father Elias Valigna, and he embarked on an ambitious plan to remark the route and reestablish it. In 1985, 1,250 pilgrims reached Santiago. In 1993, 8 years later, that number had grown to over 100,000. And it became a UNESCO World Heritage Site at the same time. The year I traveled Camino in 2016, over 200,000 people traveled just the route I did, the Camino Francis, which is the most popular one alone. So you might ask, how did I hear about the Camino? The first indication I had was from a book I read. It's going to be backwards, but it's David Lodge, Therapy. The book came out and it was published in 1990. Oops, where was it published? 1995, and I probably read it a year or two later. After Gordon and I did the trek in Nepal, we were casting about for some other kind of long walking trip to do. I suggested the Camino, and Gord kind of blew it off. He didn't want to do it because it wasn't sufficiently wilderness. And I understood, and partially you shared his reluctance. So there it stood until a couple of years before I turned 70. We had neighbors across the street, and he and his wife did it. And that sort of rekindled my interest again. So I decided, well, it would be nice to do something to mark my 70th birthday. And I gradually came around to settling in the Camino. When I mentioned to Elvira, she was pretty reluctant. She thought it was a kind of stupid idea. But when I suggested maybe buying a motorcycle as an alternative, she warmed to it rapidly. So I think we'll just head into the presentation. This is the route that I chose. It's Camino Francis. It runs from Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, which is just over the mountains in France, and ends up in Santiago de Compostela, which is sort of the northwest corner of Spain. Total distance is about 780 kilometers, and I added a 3-day extension on that took you out to the coast, a little fishing village called Lucia, and on to Finisterre, literally the end of the world. Just a few quick pictures of the route. Much of the route is on these, what they call a senda, which is gravel path along highways. There's one there, there's one in the bottom right-hand corner. These are much maligned by the pilgrims. It's not the best way. There are some nice trails. Bottom left-hand corner is the start of the trail going over the Pyrenees, and the bottom right is coming out of Pamplona later on. So waymarks. The trail is generally very well marked. It's a challenge to mark any trail that's that long. The usual mark you would see would be just a yellow arrow, a flecha amarillo, it's called in Spanish. The scallop shell, as you see in the corner and here, is also used quite a bit. Some of it is quite artistically done. The top left-hand corner is a small sign on a building beside the path. Logroño was the first major town you come to, and it's very stylized and quite artistic. Going through Pamplona, we had these little round discs on the top right. You had 4 or 5 of those a block. So other creative marks were the side of a Coke machine. It also gave you the distance to Santiago. The distances were kind of erratic, and some of them were highly inaccurate. The middle right is a sign you can barely read for the graffiti, but it was very atypical. Most of it was in pretty good shape. The bottom right is just another style. I put this in because although the trail was not well marked in some places, especially in cities, this particular place where the trail obviously turns left and crosses the highway has no fewer than 4 signs advertising it. One here, one here, one here, one here. And this one also warns that you're going to cross a highway in case anybody hadn't noticed. There was a few actually lovely signposts. These ones were every kilometer, but they only lasted for 10 kilometers as you cut through one corner of a province. As you got into Glacia, which the final part of the trail, they gave you the distance to Santiago to the nearest meter. So this is 156 kilometers, 367 meters, which seemed to be a little bit overkill. Pretty well all the pilgrims that do the Camino stay in albergues, or it's kind of a hostel, a pilgrim hostel. They cost about 5 to 10 euros a night. To give you bunk bed accommodation, sometimes a breakfast, and sometimes a communal meal at a communal supper at an extra cost. This is the very first one I stayed in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port. If you got there early, you got a bottom bunk. If you're lucky, a few of them had single beds, and this is my sleeping bag and pack on the left. This is the municipal hostel or albergue in Burgos, the first large town you came to. Actually, anyway, this was built a few years ago. I think it's 7 stories tall altogether. Very modern, very comfortable. This was the worst albergue that I never stayed at. It does have a solar panel up here, and it's just battery powered. So you have electricity if it's sunny out.
I'd stay there.
This is probably one of the older ones that I stayed in. The bunk beds here are nicely spaced out. You don't want to stay here when it's too cold because there's a poisonous protein heater in the corner to warm you. Here's the laundry facilities, and this is pretty typical. You have cold water coming into some stone tubs. Usually they'd have a bar or two of soap hanging out, and then have a rack somewhere for you to dry your clothes on. You had to do laundry probably every 2 or 3 stops. Most people travel very lightly, and I was no exception. My whole pack weighed about maybe 10 kilos or less. That's when I started. It weighed a lot less when I finished, but we'll talk about that later. This is the only night I spent that wasn't in an albergue. This is the night before I got to Santiago, second last night of the first part of the trek. There wasn't any albergues around where I wanted to stop, so I had one night of wallowing the luxury of my own room, a double bed, a washroom. It was lovely. Food and drink. The first morning I had breakfast at the albergue. The breakfast consisted of a cereal bowl full of Nescafe coffee and a few rounds of baguette with some marmalade. And that was the last albergue breakfast I had. After that, I would just start out walking before breakfast, probably do an hour or 2. At one Sunday, I had to go 3 hours before I found a cafe. And this would be my standard breakfast I'd order. This is what is referred to in Spain as a tortilla. The tortilla is like a crustless potato quiche. And it came with I'd order an Americano coffee with it. And you always seem to get baguette with everything. For lunch, you get a little bit vegetable starved with your breakfast and dinners. So they did often have a salad option, more baguette, of course. And the beer is nice. I didn't usually have lunch until I'd finished my walk for the day. I'd start between 6 and 6:30 and usually finish 1 or 2 in the afternoon. Paella is one of the signature Spanish dishes. It's something that I've had occasionally and really like. Saffron rice with chicken, vegetables, usually shellfish in the shell. This was a real poor cousin's edition of it. But also notable in the picture is the wine container. It's a sort of a half-liter beer bottle, which is recapable. The meals you generally have, they had what they call a pilgrim's menu, or Menu del Peregrino, which is Spanish for pilgrim. It consisted of an appetizer, a main course, which were almost interchangeable, a postre, which is dessert, which I never ordered, and a free beverage. For the beverage, you had your choice between water, coffee, soft drink, or wine. I didn't spend a lot of time agonizing over which beverage I was going to have. The wine could be anywhere from a glass of wine to a full bottle of wine, but seemed to average somewhere around half a liter. This is one of the Camino meals I had in a place called the Round House, the albergues. There's actually, if you look in the center at the back, I think a female there. I'm not sure why there's it's kind of an almost exclusively male population, because the genders were pretty even on the Camino itself. This was probably one of the best meals I had, or certainly the most ample. The tureen here is full of soup, and everybody had this garlic soup until they didn't want any more. Then they bought out a salad, then they bought out a pasta dish. They had bread here. Every time a bottle of wine went empty, it was immediately replaced with a full one. So it was basically all the wine you could drink. And for most of the people, that seemed to turn out to be one hell of a lot. Speaking of wine, they had fountains, water fountains all along the Camino. This one winery, Bodegas Arache, also had a wine fountain. So you could fill your bottle up with either red wine, or there's a white wine tap behind me. Sounds good, but it came out in such a small dribble that it took me about 10 minutes to get half a liter. And this is pulpo, which is Spanish for octopus. It's kind of the signature meal of Glacia. I like octopus quite a bit, so this was a bit of a treat, although the cephalopods are supposed to be incredibly intelligent and animals, and you feel a little guilty about eating them. Okay, here's, I want to talk a little bit about the people. Any experience you're going to have on this is going to be really influenced by the people you meet. Every time you do the Camino or something like this, it's going to be different. And this is a big variable. So when you leave Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port at the start of the Camino Francis, there's probably about 100 to 120 people a day that leave. The guidebook that I had, which is by far the most popular one by a Scot called John Brierley, laid out an itinerary with stops that average roughly 24 kilometers a day. I plan to do about half of that again. So most people would, or many people would follow the itinerary in the guidebook. So you would start with this cohort or phalanx of people, and you'd continue with them the whole Camino and get to know them pretty well. I did find a smaller group of what we consider the elite or the long haulers that were doing greater distance. One of the first people I met at my first albergue was, after leaving Saint John, was this Ukrainian girl who was living and working in San Diego called Liana. And she became probably my most consistent partner across the Camino. The very same albergue, first night, I met a Japanese guy called Fuji-san, or Fuji. I caught up with him the second day after I'd stopped for lunch, and we walked together for a few hours before he dropped back. But we'd agreed to meet in the next albergue, which is an old monastery pictured here. Yeah, we had some drinks, went out for supper, left again the same morning. And I planned to travel with him for a while, but he dropped back somewhere during that day, and I went on beyond our planned stop. And I didn't see Fuji again till 2 days before the end of the trip after I'd left Santiago. This is Vladimir. He was a Russian. Vladimir was in the army in the special services, a commando. I called him Vlad the Impaler. I told him he could be my bodyguard. Vlad didn't have a family, and he was awkward around people, but he really loved animals, as you can see by his reaction to the tin donkey. Antonio the Catalan. I met Antonio maybe a week into the Camino. We shared a small room together. There was only 3 beds. There was just the 2 of us in it. Antonio made some of the loudest and strangest sleeping noises that I've ever heard. He's also a unilingual Spaniard. He had absolutely no English at all. The only person I really met that didn't have at least a smattering of it. However, we ran into each other along the route fairly commonly, and our conversations were in Spanish, and were very limited because of that. This is Ola the Swede. I just took a picture of him because he looked interesting. He had a business making wooden flutes, I think. This was Philippe, the Frenchman. Philippe started the Camino deep into France and had probably walked a good month before he got to Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port. He had lost his wife, so he was sort of doing his kind of some kind of therapeutic Camino. Kevin the Brit. He's Kevin the Brit because there's also California Kevin, and later on Courtney Kevin. Not that common in the name. It probably reminds Gord of doing the Annapurna circuit about 8 days into the trip in 2001. We'd met more Australians named Alistair than we had Americans. Here were Kevins. Wasn't very sure about Kevin, actually. He'd started the Camino with his 19-year-old daughter as a sort of a bonding exercise. But 4 or 5 days into the trek, they split up. I don't think the exercise was successful. It could have been because Kevin was a very strong walker and his daughter had trouble keeping up, or it could have been because she wanted to meet young boys and Kevin was cramping her style, or a combination of the two. Kevin also packed with him a circular didgeridoo, which he entertained us with once. Only once, thank God. Here's Gad the Impaler. He's not actually Impaler at all. It just rhymes with Vlad, so I put that in there. Gad I met in Elbergay, and he was traveling by himself. There was a few other people there. He seemed a little lonely, so I invited him to join me for supper that night. There was only one cafeteria at this particular stop, but he said his stomach was bothering him and he was trying to lose weight. So he was going to pass up on supper. He did show up when I was halfway through and had a glass of wine with me. Gad was a priest in Germany. He told me his story. His father died when he was fairly young. He had a difficult upbringing. His wife was a doctor who was an alcoholic and had just left him. He had a job in the administrative side of the church, and he'd just been fired from that. So he had lots of reasons for being on a pilgrimage, I suppose. The interesting part of all this was I listened to his story, sort of heard his confession, gave him absolution, suggested some uh, better courses of action for him. So it was almost like a role reversal, you know. I was the priest and he was the parishioner. These people I met on the night I had the single room, they were staying in the same hotel, Kevin the Third and Debbie. And they turned out to be from Courtney, which is just a few kilometers away from where I was. I thought it was a brilliant coincidence, but I never saw them again after that. Here's Lena along with Titania. Titania is Lena's sister. She flew into Burgos and joined up with Titania roughly about a third of the way into the trip and did the rest of the trip to Santiago with her. So we shared a lot of meals and often stayed in the same albergue together. And Kevin the Brit came with us quite often, which may have been a good thing. And lastly, this is, well, almost lastly, this is Debbie. We just ran into Debbie after we left Santiago on our way to the coast. So she had done the trip with her husband. Her husband left early because of family emergency. Debbie was from Regina, now living in Blaine, just across the border in Washington, and her husband was from Australia. One of the reasons you're seeing all these people pictures is because Elvira historically complains whenever I go away, I take pictures of scenery and no pictures of people. So I forced myself to take people pictures in this time. And this is, the last was a pretty little Italian girl called Fendi. She shared the taxi with us from Finisterre back to San Diego at the end of the trip. This is the ABC section, another bloody church, another bloody castle. You can't do a slideshow of Europe without churches and castles because you can't. First church, this is not a great picture, but it's Santo Domingo de Calzada Cathedral. There's the inside. It's the only church I went inside. I was so kind of creeped out and by all the gold leaf and statues that I didn't venture inside another church. Nothing understated about this. Here's Burgos Cathedral, certainly the biggest church and one of the most impressive that I've probably ever seen. It would dwarf it would dwarf the cathedral I can't remember the name of in in Paris. Thank you. Whew. You know. Anyway, it goes, you know, it occupied probably more than the city block. It extends far beyond here. It was built over a period of almost 100 years. Most impressive of all to me is just who could envision this, who could put it in paper, you know, and realize their vision, to look at the, you know, the virtuosity in the stonework and the craftsmanship. It does beg the question, could we build something like this today? And my guess would be no. This is same city, Burgos. This is the entry gate into the old town, or one of the entry gates into the old town. Once again, a pretty impressive piece of stonework, very good eye appeal. This is the ruins of the Convento de San Anton, 15th century, so 1400 somewhere. I know that because it says so on the sign.
Hey, you're up to 300 slides already.
Yeah. No. Anybody who's been to school might know what that means. Anyway, this is San Martin de Tours in Fromista. Fromista was a beautiful little town. This church itself was supposedly one of the finest, if not the finest example of Romanesque church construction. Here's some details of all the roof brackets. There was over 250 of these, and each one was different than the rest. Animals, gargoyles, angels, very impressive. This was Leon Cathedral, much smaller than Burgos, but very impressive nonetheless. This is Astorga, which has both a castle and a cathedral, both of which were lovely. And this is the final church picture. This is the Cathedral of Santiago, where they held the Pilgrim's Mass. Obviously, they're doing quite a bit of renovations or upgrading on it, or sort of restoration would be a better word. Interesting in this picture, you can see the before picture, the during picture, and the after picture. Okay, this is a slide I put in, the wrong way to lighten your pack. These are things that I lost on the Camino. The second day I lost my binoculars. They were a small mini pair of binoculars, but quite expensive. I think 2 days later, I left my shaving kit and towel in the bathroom. When I went back to get it, it was missing. I checked with the hospitaleros, which run the albergue, and nothing had been turned in, so it never did show up. I lost my watch, my favorite pair of pants. Just a few days before Santiago, I lost my sleeping bag. Unfortunately, the night I lost that, I stayed in one of the very few albergues that didn't give you a blanket, so I ended up putting in all the clothes I had in my pack, which wasn't very many. You might ask, how the hell did you lose a sleeping bag? I got up early to leave, but it was still more or less dark. I had my pack on a table in the room beside the dormitory, and was in the process of rolling it up to put in my pack. And another pilgrim was trying to get out the door, but was having trouble because it was locked. So by the time I went down and helped him get out, I just went back and grabbed my pack and left. I didn't notice my sleeping bag was rolled up beside it. I lost my guidebook as well, which was very bad. And the last, of course, was my self-respect. Okay, here's just some scenes from the journey, and I'll talk a little bit about Furies, but we'll go along fairly closely. This is day one, climbing up the Pyrenees in the way to Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port. This is one of the most scenic parts of the route, and it was unfortunate that this was on day one because it would have been nice to have this to look forward to further on. This is going through the town of Pamplona, which is famous for the running of bulls. Here's another broader shot of the Pilgrim's monument. Here's the mule that Vlad the Impaler was grasping. This is Puente de Reina, which basically the Queen's Bridge.
Building arches on the bottom.
Yeah. So this bridge, it's a 6-arch bridge. It was made in the 11th century, so basically 1,000 years ago. It has these sort of wedge buttresses at the bottom, which deflect debris into the channel when the water's high. The reason I put this on there is it's interesting to look at things like this and also hear about the crumbling infrastructure we have in North America that was all built 100 or 150 years ago. It's 1,000 years old and still going strong. So this is what some people call progress. Here is in Los Arcos. I was actually there for the weekend where they had the running of the bulls. Pamplona is not. It's pretty pathetic show. There was 3 of these kind of sorry looking bulls that get pushed back and forth through town. And usually mostly a bunch of small kids running around in front of them. This is entering Burgos. I put this on because I'd taken the wrong turn. It was a pretty way to get into Burgos where you go along the river and enter the town from the south. I missed the turn and ended up walking for about 3 kilometers through an industrial area, went along a busy sidewalk with noisy traffic and pedestrians to get into town. This is Castro Jerez. I'd wanted to stay here because they have an interesting ruin on the hill, but it didn't work out. I know some of you are going to think, well, shouldn't this be in the castle and church picture? Because it's got both of them. But it's not. Here's just a scene of the trail. You can see the pilgrims on it. This is coming out of Castro Jerez. This area, about the third or the middle third of the Camino, is on a high area called the Meseta. The Meseta is mostly fields of grain and other cereal crops. Very few trees, as you can see here. Little shelter from the sun or the wind. It's also known as Spain's answer to Saskatchewan. Another picture of the data. This is actually concrete here, but it disappears just over the ridge. The rest of it's just gravel. You get some really long vistas here. You can see a long distance, even if you don't really want to. It's not always encouraging to see how far you have yet to walk.
Yeah.
Here's a bunch of stork's nests. There's 4 of them on this particular structure. And this is another kind of signature European site, along with the churches and castles.
Cool.
But they're kind of fascinating, and they're always a treat to see. These are London plane trees, and you see this in quite a few of the larger towns. These are planted on either side of the sidewalk, and then docked and sort of grafted together, so they form a web over top. They're just coming out in leaf now, but when they're out fully in leaf, I think there'd be a very attractive arbor along the sidewalk. It's something I've never seen in North America, and I wonder why. Okay, you heard the knock on the door. My question is, does anybody remember the name of this church? It's in Fromista. Everybody fails.
At the Fromista Cathedral?
San Martin the Tours. Okay, yeah, I hope you do better in the next exam question. What's this called? This is a bodega. You've probably heard the word before. How it's used in French is it's a cellar sunk into a hillside where people keep their wine. And there was a few of these scattered along the route. So I put these 2 pictures in just to show sort of the age and the state of some of the smaller towns you went through. Many of the small towns look like they're dying, but they look also like they've been dying for hundreds of years. A lot of cases, there's only maybe a third to a half the buildings are occupied. Buildings never seem to be knocked down. They're just left slowly disintegrate. This one still has a wooden lintel in, which must be 300 or 400 years old, which is itself pretty impressive. Indicates a dry climate. A lot of these places, you get the feeling wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the Camino and 100 pilgrimages a day, 100 pilgrims a day passing through. Here's one for Billy, although I don't see Billy online. This is a logging truck. Here's the Cowboy Bar. I stopped here and had a beer. There's a bunch of girls here from Wyoming, which seemed appropriate. Here's a crypt. In Glacier and some of the western parts, it seemed all the burials were done above ground. So these are just rows and rows of crypts. This is, these are very common in glacier as well. It's raised up, it's got a roof on, it's got slats. And I wondered for a long time what these were, and finally found an open one, and it's where they store their corn. It's probably supposed to be rodent proof. Oh, how did I get here? Anyway, by now we're finished Santiago. We're on to this is the Atlantic coast, second last day of the trip. And the little fishing village of Lucia, beautiful spot. Very nice picture of the Atlantic. Some windmills in the upper right in the background. This is a dip in the ocean at Finisterre, where the water is not nearly as clean. This picture of my shoes. They weren't new when I started, unfortunately. I should have had a better pair, but they were pretty well thrashed when I finished. And that's the end of the slideshow. However, I have the little page to read out. There we go. I just put the screen back on. Okay, now, you guys are probably all waiting for a little bit of philosophizing at the end of the Camino. There's a kind of simple beauty to doing long walks. The days are much the same. Any problems you have are immediate and for the great part easily solvable. Where to eat, where to sleep. We seldom realize how many distractions we have in our daily lives. How many people and organizations are clamoring for our attention so they can sell them to somebody else. And just how much effort it takes to get through these busy lives we all seem to lead. How little time we have available to contemplate. So it was that I got to do some deep delving into the mysteries of life, such as why do people prefer earnest people to sarcastic and wisecracking ones? And why wasn't I told about this 60 years ago? What are these things called emotions that my brother Jeff keeps going on and on about? Why do some people have so much trouble being serious? When I proposed the title Daniel, I appended and how it failed to make me a better person. It was kind of meant as a joke, but Daniel didn't get the joke, so he put it on the advertisement. But I actually did return a better person, or at least that's what I told people. But it seemed to wear off before too long. I did talk about the experience extensively, to the point where my friends would yell, "He said the C word again," and put their hands over theirs and start backing away. One thing that did surprise me about the experience was how little I focused on the arrival in Santiago. I've always been a goal setter and had sort of a destination in mind, but in this case, it just didn't seem to be that way. I felt no sense of accomplishment or a little sense of relief when I finished at least the main part of the pilgrimage to Santiago. I was happy to depart the city the next day for the last 3 days to finish there, back on the trail again. And the last part was beautiful. It was through sparsely settled countryside, varying scenery, very few people on it. And the people that were on it were all veterans of a longer walk. The main pilgrimage, when you complete it, you get what is called a Compostela, which is a certificate of completion in Santiago. In order to get your Compostela, you have to walk at least 100 kilometers. There's a town called Sarria, which is just outside of 100 kilometers. The younger Spaniards, many consider the Compostela to be a worthwhile addition to your resume. Rumor has it if two people apply for a job, they're equally qualified, one has a Compostela or one doesn't, the person with the Compostela will get it. So starting at Saraya, the last 100 kilometers, the trail got a lot busier and the demographic changed. There's a lot more young people and young Spaniards especially. One of the highlights for most people who complete the pilgrimage to Santiago is the Pilgrim Mass. During the Mass, there's a large censer weighing over 100 pounds empty that 6 priests use a rope harness to swing this back and forth over the congregation. The censer is an incense burner for anyone who doesn't know. It sort of always appeared to me more a circus trick for tourists than it did any kind of deep spiritual exercise, and I gave that a pass. Reading the guidebook and the blogs, you almost get the impression that most people that do the pilgrimage do it for some kind of reason. Somebody usually to recover from some sort of personal trauma or something missing out of their life. Common question you ask other pilgrims you meet, and you meet a lot of other pilgrims, is, ¿Por qué el Camino? Although you don't ask that in Spanish because you wouldn't understand the answer. But it basically means, why are you doing this? Except for Philippe the Frenchman, who lost his wife, and Gad the Impaler, who had lost his job and his wife. Almost everybody I met and asked had the same answer I did. Oh, I like to walk and I thought it might be fun. For me, it certainly was that. Would I do it again? Yes, if I could. Would I recommend it to other people? Definitely. So ends my presentation. Hold your applause later.
Thanks, Uncle Paul. That was awesome. Does anyone have any questions? I guess going into it, Uncle Paul, did you have a why? Did you have any questions that you wanted to be answered? It obviously had a profound impact on you. Did it change the way that you view the world at all?
Well, as I mentioned, Daniel, first of all, it was something to celebrate my 70th birthday. It was also, if I had to give a reason, it would be to contemplate and embrace my mortality, if that doesn't sound too macabre. And did that work? I don't know. Maybe, to some extent. Yeah. And like I say, it did change me, but I don't think the change has lasted. Whether I think at the end of a couple of weeks, I was the same. I don't want to use a bad word, but the person I always was.
Hey, Paul, what months did you do that in?
I did it I started in early May. And the reason for that was to avoid both the hot weather and the crowds. It gets very busy in the summertime. It gets very hot in the summertime. And that worked out really well for timing. It was busy enough, but the weather was generally very good to walk. A lot of the days were just pleasantly cool, a bit of, a mix of sun and cloud. Had a couple of rainy days, but overall really good. And just as an aside, it's snowing heavily outside here right now.
Do you think you would have lost less if Mom was with you?
Yeah. I think if Mom was with me, she would have been like Kevin the Brit's daughter, and we would have separated in 4 days.
you be interested in meeting younger Spaniards?
What's that?
Interested in meeting younger men?
Oh, no, yeah, perhaps.
Yeah,
Or it might have-
maybe.
or it might have been the other issue.
You planning your next walking adventure, Uncle Paul?
No, I'm not, unfortunately, I think I'm perhaps starting to age out of some of these things. I don't know if I can do it again. I thought about doing it for my 75th birthday, which would be this year coming up. 2021 is a holy year. The feast of St. James is on the 25th of July, Jennifer's birthday, which is the main distinction the 25th of July has. And when the 25th of July falls on a Sunday, it's considered a holy year, and there's far more pilgrims that do the Camino. So my short answer is, I don't know, Daniel. I hope so. Not planning anything actively right now.
Hey, you still got Mount Estero planned. I hope.
Yeah. Well, I've got a feeling that I'll get uninvited a day or two before I leave.
Oh, no, not this time. It's going to happen.
Okay.
And me, did you?
What's that?
I said, never invited me, did you?
No.
Jeff.
I'm curious, Paul, how long, how many days did it take and how long was the distance?
Okay, the distance, the whole total distance was about 900 kilometers, about 780 from Saint Jean Pied de Port to Santiago, which is the Camino Francis route. I believe I did that in about 23 days. I ended up starting a day late because my flight from Vancouver to Charles de Gaulle was delayed out of Toronto. Thanks, Marvin. And I missed a connecting flight to Biarritz. So I ended up taking a high-speed train from Charles de Gaulle to Bayonne, which is right beside Biarritz, which put me a day late starting. My days, I would start usually around between 6 and 6:30 in the morning, just as it was getting light, and finish by early afternoon, usually around 2 o'clock. So it wasn't a long day. You couldn't book into the albergues much before 1 o'clock, and you had to be out by 9, and you could only spend one night. But most people would take longer. I think I averaged about 36 kilometers a day, which it didn't seem that hard. It was generally easy walking, other than Pyrenees and places in Glacier. A lot of it was flat, and a lot of it was on good trails. So you could do, 4 or 5 kilometers an hour easily.
Mm-hmm.
Are you allowed to take bikes on that trail, or is it just walking?
No, you are allowed to take bikes, and there was bikers. Not as many bikers as walkers, or nearly as many. Interestingly, the albergues will not let bikers check in until later in the afternoon, so they can't get to the the accommodation first and collaborate for the walkers.
Right.
One of the things I was going to, I didn't cover that I had in my notes was the preparation I did for it. I bought that book. I looked at some blogs. I did some training around here. I bought a pack, especially for the Camino.
You lost it. No.
Oh, no, I didn't. I lost track. I ended up with this low Alpine 35-45. The reason it's a great little pack. It's got 2 lap back belt pockets, kind of a shoulder strap pocket, a built-in rain fly. The reason I show you that is because if anyone else decides they want to do the Camino and they want to borrow a pack, they're welcome to it. I may not use it again.
Uncle Paul, how do you think about mortality now?
I'm pretty good with it, actually. You know, I've never believed in an afterlife, so when it's over, it's over. And there's something sort of elegant about that whole system. You know, you've had your turn. You got to get out of the way and give somebody else theirs.
I fail to see the elegance in that.
If people didn't die, the world would get more and more crowded. There's already way too many people here for the carrying capacity.
So
It looks like I'll be doing the next talk on unity consciousness.
so we have our next professor. So I don't know if this is just serendipity or a really strange coincidence. As I was lying listening to you talk, I was wearing a pair of socks that my dad gave me a few years ago. Didn't think twice, and when I grabbed a sock this morning, and check out the sock that I'm wearing.
But I think we should-
Oh, neat. Wow.
The Camino.
Oh, it's the Camino.
Whoa,
Camino sock.
yeah.
That's awesome.
Oh, we're muted. But yeah, as you were giving the talk, all of a sudden I turned over and did like this double take, and I was like, "What the?" Pointed out my sock, and we were both just blown away. Uncle Paul, did you get the little present that hopefully came in the mail? Did that arrive?
No.
Okay, no worries. We'll save it for another time then.
Okay.
There's a little Dubois University.
Dubois University.
What was that, Uncle Donnie?
Yes.
Oh, I thought most people didn't mark presentations till after they were given.
Yeah. Well, because we're on the other side of the country, I thought you never know when things will arrive, but that doesn't matter. If anyone wants to volunteer to do a talk in about 3 months from now, feel free to send me an email. I think it'd be cool for us to do this quarterly. And Uncle Paul, thank you so much for that. That was awesome. I learned a lot, and it was very inspiring. And I would also love to plant the seed. I know we've talked about this in the past, but to do some type of family adventure overnighter at some point for whoever would be interested in that.
Well, after this talk, how many people want to do the El Camino? Hey, raise your hand.
Okay, this is this reminds me of a motivational sort of presentation that we went to. When I was flying Auroras, we flew into Moose Jaw, the training base, to give a talk about maritime command. I wasn't giving the talk, one of the guys that worked for me was. And at the start of the talk, he said, "So how many of you want to go maritime command?" And there was maybe 7 or 8 hands that went up. He gave his motivational talk, and at the end of it, he asked, "How many people now want to go maritime command?" And 3 people put up their hands. So many of you might have wanted to do the Camino until you heard my talk.
No, we just did it vicariously through you. It's perfect. All right, everyone. Nice seeing you all. Any other burning questions before we wrap up?
I'm just curious. You were saying one of the things for your 70th birthday was maybe going on this walk or buying a motorbike. If you could go back and do it all over again, would you choose the motorbike or would you choose the walk?
The motorbike was actually a red herring. False flag.
I would like to borrow the motorbike because he wants to do the trail.
Yeah, they don't allow motorbikes on the trail.
Sorry, Don.
Yeah.
Oh, mama.
All right, everyone. This has been awesome. Nice seeing all your faces.
Yeah. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Bye for now.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Yeah.